Alright guys, so today we're going to be working on a 2007 Chevrolet Tahoe, and this is the LT model, and this is a non-police edition. So we're going to be replacing the brake pads and rotor on this thing, and I'm going to show you guys how to do this whole job thoroughly from A to Z. So a lot of you guys are DIYers like myself, and if you guys are doing this job out on the street, just make sure you guys have some safety cones set up, your wheel chocked, and a good safety jack. Now keep in mind that this safety jack, if you guys see my other videos, this is a hydraulic jack, like a floor jack, and a safety jack stand all in one. So if you guys are interested in buying this jack here, it's got a locking pin right there, so if it does come down, the hydraulic fails, it's a safety pin, as you guys can see, that bar going across there to save your life. All right, so I'll leave that part down in the description if you guys are interested in buying one of these. And I am on a busy street here, so it could be a little loud as cars go by. Remove these two 19mm bolts. So that goes on your caliper. And this should knock right off. These are torqued down to like 74 foot-pounds. So behind the slider pin, the actual slider bolt right here, as you're taking this thing off, this could spin with it. So if you see this thing spinning, you're gonna need to get a 20mm wrench to hold that nut right there, that sliding pin, while you take this bolt off. Okay, and set aside. And do the bottom one. What you're going to do is you're going to basically slide this guy out. There we go. Oh wow, we got this backing just kind of stuck onto this thing. Okay, so you're going to grab a bungee cord if you guys have one of these caliper hangers. Make sure when you hang this off to the side that you're not kicking your brake line. So now you can just slide your brake pads out, give it a quick inspection, and these things are definitely worn out. On the back of a rotor, you're going to have these two 19mm bolts right here. There's one that run at the bottom here, and then one at the top where my socket is. And we're gonna let that soak in there for just a bit. There we go. Oh, that was easy. Okay, and we can slide the rotor right off. You guys can kind of see the wear mark right here. So it could be possible that when the rotor is sitting on the hub, it's not sitting flush, and it's kind of slightly kittywampus. And then what happens after a while is that your rotor will get warped. Okay, and so you want this rotor to sit flush on your hub. To do that, you need to grab by yourself these wire brushes that fit on your electric drill, and just go at it, make it look as new as possible. And now I have this brush. It's a little different profile. This one's kind of nice because you can fit it behind the stud and your center hub. Okay, now I'm going to switch to a wire wheel, and I'm going to get around these studs. So this is where you really want to focus on, is getting all this grime off of where the shim goes in, because it's important that this shim moves just a little bit, and you don't want this thing in your caliper bracket so tight. Okay, now you want to switch to this wheel, so you can really get in these 90-degree corners right here. so this is the way I service my slider pans. Now this is one of the most important part of having a good braking on your vehicle. So these slider pans basically slides right out just like that, and you guys can see this thing is really grimy, and this is what you guys want to service, is get rid of as much of this old grease as possible. Now you want to use silicone grease when you're servicing this slider pan, and there's a couple ways to clean this thing out. You can maybe, you know, spray some brake cleaner stuff in there, but I don't like to spray brake cleaner stuff around rubber bushings or just around rubber in general. You tend to wear those things out pretty quickly. It dries out the rubber, and then you can have a premature cracking and things like that. So just like what I like to do is just basically just slide the pin in there, move it around, slide it out, and each time I pull it out, you can see there's lots of grease on there, the old grease. Okay, and it's really hard to get everything out unless you have like a parts cleaner, which I don't have a parts cleaner here in my van. So you just gotta do best you can just to get everything out. And then now, as you guys can see, it's pretty much gone. It's pretty clean. You could take a small, let me take a rag. You can take a rag and maybe stuff it down in a hole. Just try to get a little bit more out of there. But then again, you want to be careful that as you're jamming your screwdriver in this hole, that you're not tearing the boot. So just be careful if that's what you choose to do. Okay, now as far as what kind of grease to use, I use a specific brake silicone. This is a silicone paste made for automotive, because you want to make sure you use an automotive silicone, because there's a high temperature in here, so you want to make sure you're not using just any silicone, and make sure that it's rated for automotive. So now another important thing here is, once you grease up your slider pan, is make sure there's no grease at the very tip, because if you put grease in here at the very tip and you slide it in here, you're going to create an air pocket inside your slider pan, your piston right here, and it's not going to work properly. Okay, and then slide it in, and you'll know when it looks good is when you push it in. It's going to come out just a little bit. It's got a little rebound. Alright, so one thing I forgot to mention here, on your caliper bolts, if they're dirty or rusty, you want to make sure you take a wire wheel and clean it off. Alright guys, so now we're ready to slap on the rotor, and before we do that, we're going to put a little bit of anti-seize on the knuckle here, on the hub, so that when I do this job down the road, I don't have to worry about this thing seizing to the rotor. There you go. And if I didn't mention this already, once you're ready to put the rotor on and the brake pads on, it's a good idea to get yourself a fresh pair of gloves. And secondly, before you put the new rotors on, it's important to take a clean rag and wipe off this light coating of oil that the manufacturers put on here before they ship it, just so that it doesn't, arrive at your doorstep rusty. So you can see a little bit of oil and dust is on there. So make sure you guys get that off. Okay, now when you put this on here, you got to remember that little tiny screw we took off, and you want to make sure you line that up just like that. And you don't need to crank on this thing, just nice and snug. One thing you'll notice with this particular vehicle is on the back side, the bracket is flat and straight, and the front is curved, and your brake pad is also that way. So keep a note, mindful note of this. Alright guys, we're going to be using red thread lock on these bolts. Just a little bit. Okay, now we're going to torque these guys down to 147 foot-pounds. Alright guys, so today we're going to be installing these Duralast Elite ceramic pads. You guys can kind of see the honeycomb shape in here. This is, one of the better brakes that I have used on my other vehicles. And I've had really good luck with these brakes. They don't make any noise as it wears down to, down on the pads. And it's a very high quality pads. Alright guys, so these shims goes on one way. And one thing I want to know is, I noticed that some pads, like the cheaper pads you guys buy, they don't come with new shims, surprisingly. So if they don't come with shims, make sure you guys upgrade your brakes to pads that does come with shims. You want brand new shims in here so that your brake system works properly. And this thing basically snaps right in. Okay, and again, when you put this in there, it shouldn't be difficult. It should slide right in, as long as you guys did a good job of cleaning up your bracket there. And the top one goes in just like this. Okay. All right, so that's pretty easy. Okay, so as I was saying earlier about your bracket here, the back side is flat. As you guys can see, the back side is flat. And the front pad is shaped like a banana. Okay, you guys see that? So make sure that you put the flat side in the back. And again, I want to emphasize the importance of getting yourself a newer pair of gloves, or just be very careful not to touch the pads with your dirty gloves. And these things just slide in. Super easy. Okay, just like that. Now, what some people do, and I've done this in the past, it depends on where you live. We're in Northern California. We don't have to worry about rust. But if you guys are living in a rust belt area, a little bit of anti-seize on these metal will help you guys get this thing off. If for whatever reason this thing gets rusted on your caliper, it'll be easier to take off next time. So that's up to you. So basically you slide this in between the piston there, and you just crank it like that, and it pushes that piston in. It's not super fast. There you go, just like that. There you go. So just like that. Okay, and then last thing you got to do is make sure your brake line isn't kinked. Basically slide this right on, just like that. A little bit of red thread lock, but for brake stuff I like to use red. And I've never had issue knocking these things off, especially if you guys are torquing this thing down to the proper spec. Okay, let me get the other one here. Okay, again, this is a 19 millimeter. Okay, so just remember, if this thing is spinning on you guys, make sure to use a 20 millimeter wrench on here on the back side, and just be careful not to rip that boot. Okay, and then these are going to get torqued down to 74 foot-pounds. Alright guys, so hold on a sec now. We are not done yet. The last thing you got to do, you got to make sure you apply some pressure in the brake line. So you got to pump it to get that fluid going. Okay, and then number two, we got to go down the street a little bit, make some turns, left and right turns, come back and make sure to retighten your wheel lug to 140. All right, so I just want to thank you guys for supporting our channel and watching this video. If you have any thoughts or questions, or if you have a better way of doing this, or maybe I missed something, love to hear your guys' thoughts on that down below. And I will leave all the links down below on the parts that I've used today's project. Until next time, we'll see you guys in the next video, and God bless.